So some really fascinating presentations there. Congratulations to all of you. I think you did really well with those presentations. I actually want to come to Vincent for his thoughts about what he's just seen.
My thoughts will first come to the very practical and technical application we have seen with the twin patients, the simulators, on the one side, and on the other side, the simulation of the breast drawing, and I have to say that it's really in line with what happens in the industry of surgery, because there are many type of application devices and softwares that come to us to use virtual reality, augmented reality at a time. It's not a definitive, I would say, it's not very efficient at that time. It's just starting, but it's really a nice direction, and I think that in a few years all centers will use such devices. I was also very interested with the talk with the Alzheimer's disease, because it's really a big challenge. It's affecting a lot of people around the world, and there's been a lot of research, but few efficiency in the therapy, especially there have been some medication and drugs that have been very disappointing last 10 years. So I think we have to go back to the very mechanism of the disease and better understand how it starts and how it progresses, and at which step we could do something to make it progress slowly.
And were you thinking as well that the energy metabolics of astrocytes, it's a very good proxy for whether a drug is effective or not? Because one of the big issues with Alzheimer's drugs is that you don't know whether they're working. I mean, particularly in the very early stages, if you're given
that's the case in a lot of drugs in lots of disease.
Yes, prior to symptoms, how do you know that that drug is working? Do you carry on giving the person the same drug for another 15 years? Wouldn't you like to know whether you could look at the metabolics of the astrocytes to see early on whether that was having an effect?
Well, it shows there's a big interest not only in the neurons, as she had said, but in all the environment of the cells, the astrocytes, and also the vascular apparatus, and it's also underlines the importance of the what Stefan called the twinning, and also the in silico trial, just to get faster, because this disease is like some disease, like for instance in low-grade brain tumor, when we go into clinical trials, it took 20 years to have an answer. So we need to have new kinds of trials, and that field is a perfect illustration of that.
Thank you. And there are lots of things there as well to think of about the practicalities of what you're thinking about. I mean, virtual reality. I've been reporting on the use of virtual reality in surgery for probably the last 15 or 20 years even. And it's almost nowhere near the regular surgery. And it's partly because it requires a great deal of training for people to be able to do it safely.
It requires training, but I think also the technology is not that ready, because to be effective, it needs to process a big amount of data, and the devices, for what I've seen, are not that stable. They often crash in the middle of something, and there's a kind of uncertainty in spatial delineation. So that's part of the problem. Also the learning of the process, but I think now it's more a kind of game than real innovation, but we're on the right way.
And interestingly, when laparoscopy, so laparoscopy is the one that goes through your tummy button and sort of has a poke around and you can do surgery like that. But when that first came in, actually it was adopted very quickly because people thought of it, it was a scar-free operation. So it was very popular. It was a big patient pull for it. But actually it was very dangerous at first because there were some surgeons who were very good surgeons, but they couldn't operate in the 3D that was required to use laparoscopic surgery. And I suspect it'll be the same with virtual reality. You might be a very good surgeon, but actually not be able to do the virtual reality.
I think the step is different because with laparoscopy, it's not exactly 3D, but it's 2D.
Yeah.
And you have to do a cognitive process to localize your movements. It's not the same with the virtual reality. It's a different problem. It has to see with dizziness and stuff like this. But we had the same problem with robotics, for instance, the Da Vinci. Some people had also some problems to get to it because they were not in the field. They were outside the field and they had to feel differently. So probably AR, VR are a bit more to see with Da Vinci robotics rather than laparoscopics.
So what I'm taking from this is that maybe very early on in what you're doing, because all of you want to have an impact on the world, maybe early on you need to talk to surgeons, you need to talk to patients, you need to find out, if you're working in this health area, what the real needs are, what the real challenges are. Because otherwise you can go down an alley where you're adding to knowledge, but you're not really solving a problem. And I think that's a very important thing to bear in mind if you work in health. So I'm going to come to you because you, so she's looking horrified. You, I know, work in the health area, but what did you take from this?
Well, first of all, again, thank you. Super interesting. It's incredible to see how it's advancing, but just picking up on the last point, I think the main problem starts with the education system. I mean, here speaking from someone that studied in Germany, I have lots of doctors as my friends. There's no interdisciplinary action happen between the facilities at university. I think this is where here could be an engagement created right from the start to actually have an impact, because we all study in our silos. One studies medicine, the other law, the other economics, and the other data science. But there's no interaction where we can actually see where we could benefit from each other right from the start. So I think that, from my perspective here, is what I take.
Thank you. Any thoughts from any of you? Because I'm going to pick on somebody. I'm going to pick on you. What are your thoughts about this?
No, so overall, all the presentations were amazing. Means I work with these people basically, but I didn't know in detail the presentation. But I wanted to ask, like specifically for Saurabh. So you said like this is digital twinning, we can go, but what other stage you see like that has to be done to eventually, like in a practical application, you can use this? What other steps apart from your like creating models?
Okay, so in order to use the method I discussed in the practical applications, the data needs some processing. First of all, you need to, with small experiments, you need to figure out what material properties are associated with a particular patient, let's say. And then you have to, for now, we do not have enough medical data to deal with, first of all. So what we do is, in my work, we use synthetic data to develop these models. So in future, it will be very important to gather and to work in the directions that how we work with real data and enrich our models.
But remember what I was saying about workforce, it being that is the most critical thing going on. I will guarantee that Vincent has spent years of his life training, years. And yet now medical students that are coming into practice now, they will not have anything like the quality and the hours that Vincent has had, because the demand for medical professionals is so great that they're put into medicine earlier and earlier, and they find it difficult to get the experience that they need in order to be of the quality of Vincent. So those simulations that people can do, not in hospital environments, but in their own learning time, are actually becoming critically important. Do you think that's true?
I completely agree with you, because there's been a reduction in the timing of education because of the law, because of what happened to different crises and stuff like this.
Working time directives.
Yeah.
Because when you were a baby surgeon, you worked 90 hours a week, and that was allowed. And that was allowed. And now you can't work 90 hours a week because you might kill a patient.
No, now it's not possible. So the people, they come with their MD, and they have seen less and less people, and also there's also difficulties, for instance, for surgeons to access to the labs and the practice on cadavers, because it's very important training. But on the other side, there are new ways of learning, like simulation devices, like different softwares, like scenes with comedians, actors, and stuff like this. There's also innovation in the field of education that probably would address some stuff that were not addressed before, like, for instance, the interaction with the patients, the fact to announce bad news to a patient, or stuff like this that were completely uncovered before. So it's a different world, but they will be trained differently.
It's a different world. Sohrab is going to be king of the new world. And it's now time for some lunch. We've had some great talks this morning, haven't we? And what you have to do during lunch, again, you have to go and talk to people that you don't know from a bar of soap. You have to go up to them and say, I'm Sohrab, what do you do? Yeah, done. Okay. Off you go to lunch, and we'll see you back in about an hour's time. So you've got time to relax over lunch and to really chat with some people that you've not met before.